There's a patch like this in almost every yard. Pale, hard. The kind of ground where the water beads up and runs sideways instead of soaking in. Push a trowel into it, and it stops like it hit a sidewalk. Turn over a shovelful, and nothing moves. No tunnels, no castings, no fat pink bodies pulling back into the dark. Just tired dirt. Now here's the part that sounds ridiculous. The thing that starts pulling that ground back to life isn't in a bag at the garden center. It's flattened against your garage wall right now, waiting for recycling day. Plain brown corrugated cardboard. But before you go grab a box, there is one kind of cardboard you should never put on your soil. And there's one small mistake that turns this whole thing into a sour, soggy mat that smells like a wet basement. Get that wrong, and you'd have been better off doing nothing. So let's be honest about what cardboard is and is not, because there's a lot of nonsense floating around on this subject. Cardboard is not fertilizer. It doesn't feed your plants. Its nutrient value is close to nothing, and anyone selling it to you as a plant food is selling you a story. What cardboard does is create an interface, a dark, damp, carbon-rich seam right where soil meets air. And that seam is the most valuable real estate in your entire garden. Almost everything that builds soil lives in that thin boundary layer. Fungal threads, bacteria, springtails, mites, and the worms that eat all of them. They need three things happening at the same time. Something carbon-rich to chew on, moisture that doesn't swing wildly, and shade that keeps the temperature steady. Bare, hard ground gives them none of that. It bakes at noon, freezes at night, sheds rain, and offers nothing to eat. That's why it's empty. Not because the life is gone forever, but because there is no reason for it to stay. Cardboard is just the cheapest way I know to build that seam in an afternoon. Free, honestly, if you order anything online. Here's exactly how to do it. Start small. A patch 2 feet by 2 feet or 3 by 3 is plenty for your first try. Pick the worst spot you've got, because that's where you'll actually see the difference. Don't rototill it. I know that feels backwards, and I'll explain why in a minute. But resist the urge. If the surface is crusted hard, all you need to do is scratch the top inch or so with a rake or a hand cultivator, just enough to break the crust so water can get in. Now sort your cardboard. You want plain brown corrugated. Shipping boxes, moving boxes, appliance boxes. Nothing glossy, nothing waxed, nothing with a slick coated finish. That's the one you should never bury. Waxed produce boxes, the kind grocery stores get lettuce and broccoli in, are treated to survive ice and moisture. They'll still be sitting there in perfect condition 3 years from now, doing nothing but blocking your soil. Pull off every piece of packing tape. Pry out the staples. Peel off the shipping labels. Tape is plastic, and it doesn't break down. You'll be picking shreds of it out of your beds for years. Heavy color printing I'd skip too. A little black lettering is fine. A big glossy full-color panel. Set that one in the recycling bin. Now soak it. This step is not optional, and it's the one most people skip. Fill a wheelbarrow or a tote with water and push the cardboard down into it until it goes limp and floppy. 2 or 3 minutes is usually enough. If you don't have a tub, lay it flat and hose it until it's dark all the way through. Dry cardboard is a shingle. It sheds water, curls at the edges, lifts in the wind, and does the exact opposite of what you want. Wet cardboard drapes down and molds itself to every dip and lump in the ground. That contact is the whole point. Lay it flat, one layer, and press it down. Overlap the seams by about 4 inches so weeds can't find the gap. 1 layer, not 3, not 6. Thick stacks are how this method goes wrong. You can lay it right on the surface, or set it a ½ inch under by scraping a little soil aside first. Either works. What matters is that the underside is touching real soil, not sitting on an air pocket. Then comes the food. Spread 1 to 2 inches of finished compost or leaf mold right on top of the cardboard. Finished is the key word. It should be dark, crumbly, and smell like a forest floor. If you can still identify what it used to be, it isn't ready. Aged manure works too, if it's genuinely old and composted. Fresh manure does not. Fresh manure carries ammonia and salts that drive worms away instead of drawing them in, and it can bring pathogens you don't want near food crops. Leaf mold is my favorite here, and it's free. A pile of last fall's leaves left in a corner for a year turns into some of the best worm food on earth. Last layer, mulch. 2 to 3 inches of shredded leaves, straw, or arborist wood chips over the whole thing. The mulch is not decoration, it's the roof. It holds moisture in the compost, keeps the cardboard from drying and curling, and stops the sun from cooking the seam you just built. Then water it. Soak the whole stack until moisture reaches the soil underneath, not just the top. You want it like a wrung-out sponge, damp all the way through, but if you squeeze a handful of that compost and water runs down your wrist, you've overdone it. Too wet is worse than slightly dry. A few adjustments depending on what you're standing on. If you've got heavy clay, go lighter on the compost, closer to 1 inch, and heavier on the coarse mulch. Clay holds water on its own, and burying it under a thick, wet blanket is how you smother it. Also, stay off that patch. Don't walk on it, don't kneel on it. Wet clay compacts under your knees faster than anything a tiller could do. If you're on sand, flip it. Sand won't hold moisture or carbon, so give it the full 2 inches of compost, 3 inches of mulch, and expect to water more often through summer. Timing matters more than most people think. Fall is the best window by a mile. The ground is still warm. The rains are coming. Leaves are free everywhere, and worms are near the surface and feeding hard before cold sets in. You lay it down in October, and by spring, it's already working. Early spring is the second best option, as soon as the ground thaws and stays workable. Midsummer in a hot, dry climate is the worst time. Worms go dormant deep down when the topsoil dries out, and you'll be watering a mat for weeks with nothing to show for it. And here's what you don't need. No coco coir, no bone meal, no bagged soil conditioner, no microbe inoculant, no starter powder. Cardboard, finished compost or leaf mold, mulch, and water. That's the whole list, and 3 of those 4 are free if you're paying attention. Now walk away. That's the hardest instruction in this whole video. Don't peel it back every weekend to check. Every time you lift that layer, you dry it out, you break the fungal threads knitting through it, and you scare off everything you invited. So what's actually going on down there while you leave it alone? Not every worm works the same shift. Some spend their whole lives in the top inch of leaf litter, shredding what falls. Those are your compost worms, red wigglers, the ones sold for worm bins. Others live down in the mineral soil, eating their way sideways through the dirt itself, and you rarely see them on the surface at all. And then there are the big ones, the night crawlers. Those build something your shovel never will. A permanent vertical shaft, sometimes several feet straight down, that they use for years. They come up at night, grab a piece of leaf, and haul it down into the ground. That's the part worth sitting with. Those deep tunnels are open pipes running from the surface into your subsoil. Rain finds them, air finds them, roots follow them down. The lines between these groups aren't sharp, and plenty of species live somewhere in between. But the useful lesson holds up. The worms that do the most for your drainage are the ones that need surface food and an undisturbed column of soil beneath it. Which finally explains why you shouldn't till this patch. A tiller doesn't just loosen dirt. It shreds every tunnel that took 2 or 3 years to build, and then the soil settles back down harder than before. Leaving the ground alone isn't laziness. It's the only way that underground plumbing ever gets finished. Now let me tell you about something strange that happens in the Florida woods. Out in the Apalachicola National Forest, families have been catching bait worms for generations, using nothing but a wooden stake and a flat piece of iron. They drive the stake in, rub the iron across the top, and the ground makes this low, grunting groan. And the worms come up, not a few, hundreds of them, boiling out of the sand and running across the surface. Gary and Audrey Ravel, out of Sopchoppy, are probably the most famous people who still do it. For most of the last century, nobody could explain it. Some folks said the vibrations sounded like rain. Then a biologist named Kenneth Catania went down there to test it and found something better. The vibration those grunters make sounds almost exactly like a mole digging. The worms aren't being called up, they're running for their lives. And Darwin had guessed as much back in 1881. It just took another 127 years for anyone to prove it. Here's why that matters to you. Worms aren't just sitting wherever the food is. They're reading the ground constantly. Moisture, temperature, vibration, predators, how tight the soil is. You're not stocking a pantry. You're building a place they're willing to live. Which brings me to the ways gardeners wreck this without realizing it. First, coated or waxed cardboard, or tape and staples left on, already covered, but it's the #1 reason people dig up a patch a year later and find the sheet perfectly intact. Second, going too thick. 6 layers of cardboard, or 8 inches of soggy compost, and you've built a lid instead of a habitat. There's real research measuring how much cardboard slows gas movement compared to wood chips, and the honest reading is this. 1 wet layer under mulch behaves fine, and a thick dry stack does not. Thin and moist, always. Third, fresh manure or a pile of wet kitchen scraps mashed underneath. Too much nitrogen in a sealed layer goes anaerobic fast. If you ever lift the mulch and get a sour, vinegary, rotten egg smell, that's your answer. Pull the layer back, let it breathe. Add dry leaves or wood chips, and it'll recover. Fourth, moisture at either extreme. Bone dry and the cardboard turns into a crisp sheet nothing can use. Waterlogged and you've drowned the very animals you're recruiting. Check under the mulch with your hand every week or two in dry weather. Fifth, buying red wigglers and dumping them into the bed, expecting them to dig. They're litter dwellers. They'll process your compost layer beautifully, and they will not build a single deep tunnel. Don't spend money expecting behavior a species doesn't have. And sixth, tearing it apart out of curiosity. Give it a season. So how do you know it's working without digging? Look for castings, little gritty piles of processed soil on the surface, usually showing up first around the edges of your compost layer. Look for middens. That's a small mound of chewed leaf bits and castings gathered around one hole. A midden means a deep burrowing worm is living directly underneath, and that's the sign you're really after. Feel the soil. Slide your fingers under the cardboard after a few weeks. It should feel cooler, darker, and slightly crumbly instead of packed and pale. And then there's my favorite test, because it gives you a number. Take a coffee can with both ends cut out. Push it 2 inches into the ground, pour in a measured cup of water, and time how long it takes to disappear. Do that on your treated patch, and on untouched ground a few feet away. Same amount of water, same day, same weather. Write both numbers down. That gap is your progress, and it's the most honest measurement in gardening. If you want to see the worms themselves without a shovel, there's a sampling method soil researchers use. Mix about 1/3 of a cup of ground yellow mustard seed into a gallon of water, and pour it slowly over roughly a square foot of ground. The mustard is an irritant on their skin, not a poison. Worms come up within a minute or two. Rinse them in clean water, and they go right back down. No harm done. 2 honest cautions. This is an observation tool, not a treatment, so don't go pouring mustard water all over your garden expecting results. And it only works when worms are active. Too hot, too cold, too dry, or ground so compacted the liquid won't soak in, and you'll get a low count that tells you nothing. Now, one thing I'd be doing you a disservice not to mention. More worms is not automatically better news. There's an invasive group people call jumping worms, spreading through a lot of states now. You'll know them when you see them. They thrash violently, almost like a snake, instead of squirming. The pale band near the head is smooth and wraps all the way around, and the giveaway is the soil itself, turning into loose granules that look like used coffee grounds. They strip surface organic matter fast and leave the ground worse than they found it. Rules on them vary by state, so check with your local extension office. And whatever you do, don't buy worms to release outdoors. Here's where I've landed after a long time watching this play out. We're trained to think a dead patch of ground is a shopping problem. It needs an amendment, a tiller, a soil test with a prescription attached, something that arrives in a bag with a price on it. 2. But most of that ground isn't missing ingredients. It's missing conditions. It's been left naked, dried out, baked, and turned over so often that nothing can finish building anything. Cover it, give it something to eat, keep it damp, then leave it alone long enough for life to move back in. Come back in a season and lift that mulch. The cardboard will be soft, half gone, threaded through with white fungal strands, and stitched to the ground by tunnels that weren't there before. The soil underneath will be darker, cooler. It'll crumble instead of crack. You didn't build any of that. You just stopped getting in the way. So tell me this in the comments, and be specific about it. What state are you in? And when you last turned over a shovelful in your worst bed, what did you actually see? And for those of you who swear by tilling every spring, I'd like to hear that side too. I'm not convinced either of us has the whole picture.